I wake before dawn most mornings, the sky still bruised with stars when I swing my legs over the bed. The mattress sags where my wife slept. I feel its hollow ache every time my feet touch the floor. I pull on worn denim jeans, the stiff snap of my belt a small comfort in a world that feels perilously unmoored. Outside, the wind whispers through the cottonwoods that line the corrals, carrying the faint scent of baked earth and grazing cattle. My name is Wade Colton, and this ranch is all I have left. 3 years ago, Joanna slipped away from me, first to illness, then to memory. I still set a plate for her some nights, half expecting her laugh to fill the kitchen. It never does. Now the only life I guide across these plains is my own, steering a stubborn herd and wrestling with machinery that creaks like an old man reluctant to admit his age. By the time the sky blanches to lavender, I'm already checking fence posts and gates. I move with purpose, patting rails to test their stability, peering into the cold glow of trough water. The cattle shift uneasily, their low rumbles a reminder that life persists, indifferent to grief. I count them every morning, a ritual that steadies my mind more firmly than any prayer ever did. Lately, though, something feels off. Yesterday, I found the gate to the east pasture ajar, its latch bent as though pried. The day before, a hoof pick was left where I'd stashed tools. No footprints in the mud, no signs of a wandering cowboy or nosy hunter. Just an unsettling sense of intrusion, as though someone or something has been studying my routines and waiting for the right moment to append them. I pause at the water trough, watching my reflection blur in the rippling surface. My face has grown leaner these years. The dark circles under my eyes are stubborn, like bruises that refuse to heal. I run a callous thumb along the scar above my brow, reminder of a brush with a steer that nearly cost me, yet I'd trade any old wound for the chance to bring Joanna back one more time. The morning's chores bleed into lunch without fanfare, mending fences, coaxing calves away from the barbed wire, hauling hay to the loft. My body moves from task to task with the mechanical precision I taught myself long ago, but my mind drifts, circling back to those small anomalies. Who would test a fence at first light? Why leave tools within easy reach? By late afternoon, the west wind kicks up dust devils that dance across the pasture, and I head back to the house for a cup of weak coffee. The cabin is quiet. I settle at the kitchen table and drum my fingers against the chipped enamel surface. Beneath the window, the old radio crackles static, tuned to a station that ceased broadcasting years ago, left on more out of habit than hope. A photograph catches my eye, Joanna in her favorite sundress, hair curling around her shoulders, her smile bright enough to challenge the sun. I press my palm to the glass. I know she wouldn't approve of my letting this place swallow me whole, but in the vast emptiness, her absence is louder than a cattle stampede. Dusk gathers its violet shadows, and I step outside to survey the land. The air tastes of cold promise, and the silhouettes of mesas etch themselves against an indigo sky. Somewhere beyond those ridgelines, life continues, people with purpose and plans, unaware of this solitary stretch of earth where I wage a daily war against loneliness. Tonight, I light the oil lamp on the porch and sit in silence, listening for the creak of boards or the whisper of footsteps. The house settles around me, groaning like an aging beast. Yet despite the emptiness, I feel eyes upon me. A tremor of unease settles in my chest, sharp and unrelenting. Tomorrow, I'll ride the northern perimeter again. I'll watch the fences, tally the herd, and pray that I'm merely chasing shadows. But something tells me the night held more than restless dreams. It left me with a question that won't be quieted. If someone truly came calling, what would they want? And so I sit, lantern lit, the horizon winking with starlight, waiting for an answer I'm no longer sure I want to hear. The cold clung to my bones that morning like a warning. I saddled Buck, my oldest gelding, and nudged him toward the northern fence line just as the sun broke over the hills in a slit of orange fire. The land stretched before us, endless and silent, dew shimmering like spilled glass over the prairie grass. I meant to ride that stretch 2 days ago, but got sidetracked fixing a busted water pump. Maybe it was guilt, or just that gnawing unease again, but I felt pulled out there like a nail to a magnet. The ride was quiet for a while, just the rhythm of hooves and the occasional crow's call slicing through the hush. I scanned the horizon, the fence, the shadows. Buck stiffened before I saw it. His ears pricked, nostrils flaring. It took me a few seconds to register what I was looking at. She was tied to a cross. Not a crucifix exactly, but a crude, towering wooden frame. Two logs lashed together with what looked like barbed wire and baling twine. She was bound at the wrists and ankles, standing upright like a scarecrow abandoned mid-construction. A tattered gray coat hung off her shoulders, her face streaked with dirt and bloodless in the morning light. Long hair clung to her face in oily strands. But it was the sign that stopped me cold. "Come back when you're perfect." Painted in crude, black letters on a scrap of plywood. It dangled from a rope around her neck, swinging faintly in the breeze. I dismounted without thinking, adrenaline flooding my limbs. My boots sank into the earth as I approached, half expecting her to vanish like a mirage. She didn't. She blinked. Her eyes flicked toward me, glassy and unreadable. I saw no terror there. No relief either. Just a dull, weary awareness that rattled something loose inside me. I didn't speak. Not at first. I just started cutting. The twine had bitten deep into her skin, but she didn't flinch when I sliced it with my pocket knife. Her body sagged as the last knot gave way, and I caught her before she collapsed. She weighed almost nothing. "Easy," I murmured, more to myself than her. "You're all right now." No answer. Not a sound. I eased her down onto a patch of dry grass and tugged my coat around her shoulders. Her lips were cracked. Blood crusted along one temple. Her boots, if you could call them that, were 2 sizes too big and worn to ribbons. She looked about 16, maybe 17. But it was hard to tell with the dirt smudging her skin and the shadows under her eyes. "What's your name?" I asked gently. Still nothing. I offered her water from my canteen. She took it, hands trembling, and drank in small, careful sips. Then she handed it back and stared at me as if measuring whether I was worth trusting or just the next bad thing waiting to happen. I didn't press her. There'd be time for questions later. Buck stood quiet nearby, as if sensing the weight of the moment. I carried her to the saddle and managed to get her seated sideways in front of me. She didn't resist, didn't speak, didn't even look back at the cross as we left it behind. She just leaned into me, barely upright, and clutched the canteen like it was the only real thing in the world. The ride home felt longer, somehow. The silence between us thickened with each mile. I kept glancing down at her face, searching for some clue, some spark that might tell me what in God's name had happened to her. But she was a wall. A breathing, fragile wall. We reached the house just after 10. I helped her off the horse, my arm around her back, to steady her. She didn't resist, but didn't thank me either. She walked with stiff, unsteady steps, her gaze low and guarded. I opened the front door and let her pass through first, motioning toward the couch in the living room. "Sit. Rest," I said. "You're safe here." She obeyed wordlessly, easing herself down onto the worn cushions. Her eyes darted around the room, taking in the photos on the mantel, the quilt over the armchair, the half-drunk cup of coffee on the table. All the ordinary things of a life she didn't seem to recognize. I crouched in front of her and met her eyes again. Blue-gray, flecked with something harder than fear. "Who did this to you?" I asked quietly. "Nothing." I sighed and stood, moving toward the kitchen. I fixed a plate, some leftover stew, a slice of bread, a glass of milk, and brought it to her. She didn't hesitate this time. She ate in silence, chewing mechanically, as if fulfilling a task rather than feeding hunger. I watched her from the doorway. There was no doubt in my mind. She'd been abandoned. Not just left behind, but thrown away. The kind of disposal that makes a man wonder what kind of world he's living in. She finished the food and set the plate on the table beside her, then folded her hands in her lap. Still silent. "Do you want me to call someone?" I asked. "The sheriff." Her head jerked, barely perceptible, but it was there. A flinch. A recoil. So, no sheriff. All right, I said softly. No calls. She glanced at me, then back down again. Her lips parted like she might speak, but nothing came out. It was then that I noticed she was still clutching the sign. The one they hung around her neck like a sentence. Come back when you're perfect. She looked at it, then at me, and without a word, let it fall from her fingers to the floor. That was when I realized she hadn't come here by accident. Someone wanted her found, or didn't care if she was. And either way, she was mine to protect now. Even if she couldn't say it, even if I didn't know her name, she didn't have to be perfect. She just had to survive. And I'd make damn sure she did. She slept for 12 hours straight, curled like a comma on the old couch, wrapped in one of Joanna's quilts. I sat across from her most of that time, pretending to read but really just listening, to her breathing, to the occasional twitch of her fingers, to the strange quiet she carried into the room like a second presence. When the girl finally stirred, the sun was slipping down behind the hills, painting the living room gold. Her eyes blinked open slowly, registering the ceiling first, then the shelves, then me. She didn't sit up, just looked, as if trying to remember whether she was still in danger or if the memory had finally loosened its grip. You're at my ranch, I said gently, setting the book aside. No one's gonna hurt you here. She nodded, just once, then looked away. I didn't push. I'd learned with cattle, and with people, that pressure too early only drives them back. You wait. You let them come to you when they're ready, or not at all. I brought her a mug of warm broth. She sat up slowly to take it, sipping with small, deliberate swallows. Her hands had steadied some since yesterday, but her silence stayed heavy between us. Got a spare room down the hall? I said. It ain't much, but there's a proper bed, and it's warm. You're welcome to use it. She set the mug down, glanced at me, then nodded again. Still not a word. I stood and motioned gently. She followed, her gait slow and stiff, but more assured than when she'd first arrived. I opened the door to Joanna's old sewing room, long since stripped of its spools and fabric. The bed was small but clean, the blankets fresh. She stepped inside without a sound, looked around as if entering a museum. Bathrooms across the hall. You need anything, just knock, I said. She gave the barest smile, more like the memory of a smile, then closed the door behind her. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. That night, I left her alone. I kept the porch light on, though, and placed a sandwich outside her door. When I checked later, the plate was empty. The days settled into a kind of rhythm. Quiet, but not cold. She never said much, not even a name, but she moved with purpose, setting the table when she thought I wasn't looking, rinsing her plate without being asked. I didn't know what she was used to, but it sure as hell wasn't kindness. It took 3 more days for her to speak. We were out in the shed, and I was oiling down a broken gate hinge. She watched from the doorway, her arms crossed tightly, sleeves pulled down to her knuckles despite the warmth. You fix things, she said. I turned, surprised less by her voice than the fact that it had weight, raspy but real, like an instrument long out of tune. I try, I said. Most things out here don't stay fixed long, though. She nodded, then stepped inside the shed. Can I try? I handed her a second rag and a socket wrench. She took both with the caution of someone expecting a trap, then knelt beside the other hinge and began to mimic my motions. Her hands were sure, not delicate, used to work, just not this kind. After a minute, she said, "Name's Ember." I didn't react right away. Just let it settle in like sun on bare skin. Wade, I said. Wade Colton. Ember didn't smile, but something softened in her shoulders. We worked in silence after that, not out of discomfort, but because the quiet finally had room to breathe. Later that night, over dinner, she asked where Joanna was. I didn't lie. Cancer, I said, gently. 3 years ago. Ember nodded. She didn't offer sympathy, and I didn't want it. We sat in that common understanding of people who've lost something big and unfixable. Is that why it's so quiet here? She asked. Part of it. She looked down at her plate. That's why I like it. There it was again, that threadbare truth, hanging between us like a wire stretched too tight. She didn't say much more that night, but she left the door to her room slightly ajar when she went to bed. A little act of trust. I didn't take it lightly. The next morning, she beat me to the barn. Had already filled the feed buckets by the time I got there, hair tied back with a strip of old cloth she must have found in the junk drawer. You ever work around livestock? I asked. She nodded. Chickens. Goats. One pig named Monday. That's a mean name for a pig.
He earned it, she said.
That made me laugh, really laugh, for the first time in longer than I could remember. But even as we found a rhythm, fixing fences, splitting wood, feeding calves, I never forgot what brought her here. That sign, those bruises, the silence heavy as stone. Ember never spoke of it, and I never asked. Not yet. She'd come from somewhere that twisted love into punishment. I could see it in the way she flinched when a door slammed too hard or froze when I stepped too close. Whatever had happened to her, it wasn't just cruelty. It was doctrine. And doctrine runs deep. Still, there was strength in her. A quiet, stubborn thread that kept her upright when most would have crumbled.
I didn't know how long she'd stay.
I didn't ask. But I knew one thing for certain. She hadn't been left behind. She'd been cast out. And if whoever did that came looking, they'd find she wasn't alone anymore. Not on my land. Not in my home. The first sign came in the form of tire tracks. They cut through the southern edge of the property, deep, recent, and unfamiliar. Not my truck. Not the feed delivery. I knelt beside them in the morning sun, fingers brushing the rutted impressions in the dirt. Tread too wide for a ranch rig, too shallow for heavy hauling. Whoever it was didn't belong out here. I followed them for half a mile until they curved off the gravel path and vanished into the high grass near the old creek. No sign of where they went from there. No footprints, no cigarette butts or bottles, just a quiet kind of trespass that left the hair on the back of my neck standing up. Back at the house, Ember was washing eggs she'd collected from the hens. She looked up as I walked in, face unreadable but alert. She'd grown sharper these past few weeks, stronger in body, steadier in presence, but her eyes still watched every room like it might turn on her. Someone was here, I said. She set the egg down slowly. How close? Too close. South pasture. Track stop at the brush line. She nodded once, didn't ask if I was sure. I'll check it again at dusk. Just wanted you to know. Ember dried her hands on a dish towel, then stepped around the counter. She didn't touch me, never had, but she stood close enough to tell me something wordless had passed between us.
Trust.
Or maybe just mutual vigilance. I can help, she said. You already are. Later that day, I found the cross again. Not the same one I'd cut her down from, but another. Newer. Built from clean wood this time, smooth and stripped of bark, planted in the dirt like a warning. There was no body on it. No sign hanging from the arms. Just a nail driven through the center beam and a strip of cloth tied like a bow. I didn't touch it. Didn't need to.
It wasn't for me.
That night, I locked the doors. Something I hadn't done in years. I loaded the shotgun, checked the generator, made sure Ember's window latch was tight. She said nothing, but I saw her watching, eyes calculating, muscles coiled like she was expecting to be yanked back into whatever hell she'd come from. Whoever's doing this, I said, they think you're still theirs. She didn't blink. They always think that. I sat on the edge of the table. You want to tell me what we're dealing with? She was quiet for a long time. Then finally she spoke. They call it the Fold. It's not a church, not really. They live off the map, in the hills east of Red Rock. Don't pay taxes. Don't send kids to school. They say perfection's the price of belonging, and if you fall short, she looked away. You're made an example. The sign, I said. The cross. She nodded. I didn't fall in line. I asked too many questions. When I tried to leave, they put me out for the coyotes. Said if I survived the night, I could come back. Prove I was worthy. A silence settled over us. Heavy. Like a second dusk. You are never going back, I said. Her mouth tightened. I never looked back. I stood and paced to the window. The yard was dark, save for the porch light. Beyond it, the world looked too still, like something was watching. We'll need a plan, I said. They don't come in daylight. They believe night hides their sins. I turned toward her. You think they'll come here? They've come before. To others. They don't leave loose ends. The last word lingered like a stone dropped in water. I didn't ask if she wanted to run. That door had closed the minute she set foot on my land. And even if it hadn't, I could tell in the way she squared her shoulders. This time, she wasn't backing down. We spent the next day fortifying. I wired up motion lights, rigged the barn door with a spare latch, moved the pickup closer to the porch. Ember cleaned out the cellar, stocked it with supplies without being told. She didn't say much, but her silence wasn't fear. It was resolve. She'd been hunted before. Now, she was ready to be found. That evening, I found her in the field behind the barn, standing beside the new cross. She stared at it for a long time, arms wrapped tight across her chest. You don't have to go near it, I said from behind her. I know, she answered. She turned slowly, her expression unreadable but calm. They want me to be afraid. I nodded. Are you? I asked. She looked me in the eye. No. I'm angry. That was when I knew she was going to fight. Maybe not with fists or guns, but with defiance. With the kind of stubborn, bruised resilience no doctrine could erase. I reached into my coat pocket and handed her something small, an old brass key on a wire ring. What's this? Gun locker. Just in case. She took it, studied it for a moment, then slid it into her back pocket. We walked back to the house in silence. The stars were starting to appear, one by one, as the sky deepened into ink. Somewhere out there, the fold was watching, waiting for the dark to fall. But so were we. And this time, they weren't the only ones ready.